My name is Charles Braddock. I am 63 years old. 6 weeks ago, at my own daughter's engagement party, I stood behind a wall of white hydrangeas and heard her fiance tell his best friend that he did not love her, that he only needed her signature in a few places before her father's entire fortune became his. I did not confront him that night. I smiled, shook his hand, and offered him an investment deal reserved for family only. 6 weeks later, that same man sat across from me and signed a notarized confession in his own handwriting, then thanked me on his way out the door. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you are listening from. Now let me take you back to the night I heard those words, and the decision that took less time than a heartbeat. I spent 11 years loading freight trailers at 4 in the morning, before I ever owned a single truck. Today Braddock Freight runs 600 trucks across the Southeast, an estate worth north of $50 million, built one early morning at a time. My daughter Marissa is 29, a pediatric speech therapist with her mother's eyes, and a laugh that fills a room so completely there is no oxygen left for anything uncomfortable. She remembers birthdays other people forget, cries at truck commercials she will never need, and is without competition the finest person I have ever known. She is also, exactly as I have watched her whole life, the kind of warm, wide, open-hearted woman that a certain kind of man looks at and sees a door. Blake Sinclair shook my hand for the first time with a firm grip and a rehearsed smile, his eyes doing quiet inventory of my living room while his mouth complimented my daughter. I knew precisely what I was shaking hands with. My wife Diane told me I was being paranoid, so I did what fathers in my position have always done. I said nothing. I watched everything. I waited. The engagement party was held in our garden on a warm September evening, white hydrangeas everywhere. Marissa's favorite since she was 6 years old. She was radiant that night, and whatever my reservations about Blake, I was genuinely happy for her. Standing half hidden behind a stone pergola column, checking a text from our event coordinator, I heard two voices around the corner. Blake's friend, loose with champagne, said, "Her old man owns a jet. He owns the hangar." Then Blake's voice dropped into the register of a man who believes he is completely alone in the universe. "I like Marissa," he said. "She's a sweet girl, but this is the actual plan. You don't get a door like this twice." I stood there holding a glass I no longer felt, and made a decision that has lasted the rest of my life. Confrontation would have warned him. A warning would have made him careful. And careful men are far harder to catch than confident ones. So instead of setting a trap that night, I decided to furnish a room and leave the door standing open. I walked back into my own party and before he left, told him I had an investment opportunity I wanted to run past him. His excitement bloomed instantly behind his eyes. The next morning I called Everett Lowe, our family attorney of 24 years, and told him exactly what I had heard. I asked if we could build a document that would force Blake to reveal himself in writing without ever suspecting he was the one being tested. Everett called back in 3 days with exactly that, a partnership agreement dense enough to feel institutional, built around one deliberately load-bearing clause. A notarized declaration that his involvement with our family was not motivated by personal financial gain. I invited Blake to lunch at a restaurant engineered to whisper one word to a man like him: legitimate. I slid the partnership proposal across the table, 12% equity in a $52 million portfolio, managing partner, a role he could not resist calculating in real time. Then I slid the declaration across as a mere formality. He read it 4 full minutes, longer than a man simply signing, shorter than a man genuinely uncertain. I studied a painting on the wall with complete disinterest while he decided. Vanity walked him to the pen before his judgment could object. He signed it in front of a notary sitting at the table directly behind him the entire lunch, and a small recorder in my breast pocket captured every single word. 3 weeks after that lunch, I called Marissa home and told her everything, the column, the hydrangeas, every syllable Blake had spoken that night. When I reached the part where he called her a sweet girl, but this is the actual plan, something in my daughter's face went out quietly, like a lamp switched off from inside. She asked how long I had known. Since the night of the party, I told her. She asked why I had not told her sooner. Because you needed to see it, sweetheart, not hear it from your father, I said. I needed to hand you something solid, something he could not smile his way around. I wish this had never needed to happen at all. I wish my daughter had simply found a man who loved her the way she deserved, instead of one who calculated her inheritance the same week he proposed. But wishes do not undo 6 weeks of a plan already set in motion by his own hand. The truth does. She looked at the folder of evidence on the table for a long time, then at me, and said 5 words, soft and completely immovable. I want to be there. The night before Blake arrived to sign the final partnership paperwork, I sat with Everett going through every document one final time. The transcript, the recording, the notary's confirmation. 6 weeks of quiet, invisible masonry. Every brick carrying Blake's own fingerprints and no one else's. Just before midnight, I confirmed the final arrangement with Everett. Marissa and Diane both present in the sitting room the next morning, when Blake walked through that door, believing he was still the one closing the deal of his lifetime. 12:03. I am 63 years old. I am, for the first time in 6 weeks, ready to let him walk into the room I built for him. Across town, Blake was almost certainly still imagining the wire transfer, confident he had just conquered a kingdom. He had no idea he had walked out of that restaurant lunch, having handed me every piece of evidence I would ever need. At 9 the next morning, Blake arrived with his same rehearsed easy stride, expecting a formality between him and a wire transfer. I opened the door before his knuckles reached it, and for one flickering instant, something uncertain crossed his face when he saw mine. I led him to the sitting room, where Marissa sat red-eyed and spine straight, gripping a pillow with both hands, Diane composed and still across from her. The leather portfolio, open on the table beside the recorder, and the printed transcript. Blake looked at that table, and I watched the exact second he understood that everything he thought he was building had in fact been built around him. Not a foundation, a cage. Diane laid 3 documents in front of him and told him plainly, in a voice smooth and terrifying in its pleasantness, exactly where we stood. He looked at me the way he always had, expecting the door he had spent 6 weeks walking through to still be open. It was not. It had not been since the moment he signed that declaration in front of a notary he never once suspected was there for him. I learned across 30 years of negotiating tables that a trap only works on a particular kind of man. One so convinced of his own brilliance that the possibility of the table turning never once crosses his mind as physics. I always thought that lesson applied only to business. I understand now it protects the people I love most just as completely. Blake's engagement to Marissa ended that morning. The signed declaration and recording later used to unwind every financial claim he had begun quietly preparing behind the scenes. Everett still handles our family's affairs, 24 years and counting. As for Marissa, she is healing slowly, surrounded by 2 parents who built a room specifically, so she would never have to take his word over the truth. I think about that column of white hydrangeas every time I walk past it in the garden now. And I think the quietest rooms are sometimes the ones built the most carefully. If you have ever had to protect someone you love by staying silent long enough to gather the whole truth first, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments. And if this one moved you, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Tales. There is more where this came from.